The next thing we're going to talk about is our reach technique. We use this, as Coach talked about, in our zone option as well as our outside zone. When we talk about our reach technique, it's used when we have a wide technique to us. So if there were a tight technique or someone lined up directly on us, we'd use something called the T-step. But when we have a technique that's away from us, covering the player next to us, or a wide technique if I was a tackle, a wide 5, or a tight end with a wide 9, we're going to use what we call a reach technique. The reach technique is very specific because you need to give ground to gain ground. And what I mean by that is, by initial alignment, you're out leveraged. So you have to take some step in which you can get your head and body in a proper position to take outside leverage over. So what we're going to do is we're going to teach a bucket step. And the depth of the bucket step is determined by how wide the technique is from you. The wider the technique, the more width you have to get with your bucket step. So the steps are pretty simple. We use a bucket step, we use a lateral crossover, which then goes through the midline of the defender, and then we take a reach cutoff step in which that outside leg takes a step outside the defender, and we fight ourselves for outside leverage. So I'm going to demonstrate the reach technique to you now. If this was a 9 technique to a tight end that we have to reach, it's not a wide technique in which I have to get a lot of depth on my reach. It's relatively tight. So what I'm going to do now is just take a bucket step on a 45 for my first step. My second step incorporates what we call a crossover, a lateral crossover. This goes through the midline or the crotch of the defender. My third step is my reach cutoff step, which comes outside the defender's outside leg. As I do that, I'm going to place my inside hand low on the chest plate, my outside hand underneath the shoulder pad, and I'm going to push and pull for leverage as I work my feet. What we're going to talk about now is a technique used if you cannot gain outside leverage on that reach block. If that reach block does a good job of fighting you and starts to work you flat down the line of scrimmage, you need to take your inside arm and throw a punch to the sky. So if you were trying to get the back of your shoulder to his outside shoulder. What I'll do now is demonstrate that technique to fight off a flattened reach block. Bucket, crossover, reach, rip. Now what we'll talk about is working with a tight technique. So what we're going to do now is talk about the T-step. The T-step is used to move forward on a positive angle at 45 degrees aggressively to a tight technique. By alignment, I'm out leveraged, but I'm not out leveraged that wide. So therefore, I don't need to give so much ground and take a bucket step. I can step positive on a 45-degree angle. But the rest of my technique works exactly the same. So I'll take a positive 45-degree angle first step, lateral crossover, putting my backside leg through the midline of the defender on my second step, and then my reach cutoff step with my outside leg to gain leverage again. I'll demonstrate the drill. Back up here. And that is used typically by a guard that has to reach a 3 technique or a tight technique for a tackle on a 5. What we're going to talk about now is a zone combo. This is where the tackle and tight end are responsible for the end man in the line of scrimmage and the play side linebacker. Here we're going to use a technique in which we'll have to use a reach to cut the angle off, as well as we're going to have to use a T-step depending by alignment. So what we're going to do now is work the footwork between the tackle and the tight end. Depending on the technique that you have will determine who has to take the reach step and who may have to take a T-step. Coach is going to be our tight end, and I'm going to be our play side tackle, and we're going to line up initially with the 7 technique. And one of the complicated things about the zone combo is knowing who's got to come off and at what time. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about seeing color. Okay? Coach right now has a 7 technique, so he can use the T step. He can take the tight reach step to gain leverage. Because it is a 7 technique and it's wide for me, I will take the reach step in which I have to bucket. As we both step, we're going to work on a track. And as we move on our track, we're going to read this defender. If this defender fights Coach's T-step reach and tries to get width, I'm going to continue on my track to the play side linebacker. We're going to call that seeing color. If the color of the defender disappears, I have to continue to move on. If the color of the defender, the 7 technique, stays in this gap, as I reach it, I'm going to take it on, and that means the color's disappeared for Coach, and he's going to work off to the play side linebacker. So we're going to work our footwork together in step sequence. The first thing we're going to do is Coach will take his positive 45 step, and I'm going to take my reach step. Our second step is both going to be aimed through the midline of the 7 technique. Our third step is going to be my reach cutoff, his reach cutoff. Now, Coach will not leave the defender until I've worked my head to that side and literally have bumped him off with my outside hip. And we're going to step. So that's how we would zone combo a 7 technique. If we have a 6 technique, a head up on Coach, and we have the same combo block, zone combo block needed to be made, our footwork will be identical. What we're going to demonstrate here right now is if color disappears for the tackle, which means the 6 technique is going to work to the outside shoulder of the tight end, where now he's going to have to fight for outside leverage. Because it's still a tight technique, he'll take his initial T-step or positive step on a 45-degree angle. He still does not need to bucket, and the tackle will. We'll step together. Step, step, step. And as it disappears, I continue my track, keeping my hand to the inside as I work to the play side linebacker. The last technique we're going to talk about is our drop step pull. It's important to us in our belly play as well as in our trap. Our guards have been taught to use this drop step pull because it's a more efficient way of moving. It happens much quicker, and it allows the guard to keep their shoulders square to the line of scrimmage. This helps them in the efficiency of movement and the speed at which they can get to their block. What we originally had started with is a flat pull and having the guard turn his shoulders towards the sideline, which is wasted movement and takes too much time. So by using this technique, it's helped us make blocks, and in certain situations, if the trap man has disappeared, it's allowed that guard to go upfield to another player, which has been very beneficial to us in both the belly and the trap. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk to you about the initial step. What the guard will do, if he's going to pull to kick out a 3 technique, so I'm going to be a guard opposite side of where Coach is. So there's a guard, the center, and then the guard over there. It's on the outside shoulder of the guard. What I'm going to do here is take my first step, which is a drop step with my inside leg. My inside leg. That drop step is about 6 inches. That's just enough to allow the center to block back or the tackle to block down and allow me to come right off his hip. The second step, I like to tell our guards to step at 2 o'clock. So we want to get that toe pointed to 2 o'clock, which now puts me on a track where my shoulders are somewhat square to the line of scrimmage. And as I attack my trap block, if he disappears upfield, I can still continue to downfield without having to change direction. My third step is continuing along that 2 o'clock trap. If my technique is there, as my left foot comes down, I'm going to keep my head to the inside. My outside shoulder will make contact, and I'll keep my head inside, and I'll drive my trap block away. Again, if this block disappears upfield, it'll look like this. And I'll continue on to the linebacker. Now, that same pull is efficient in the belly, in which the tackle has to make a down block on the 3 technique as I pull around him. So, I am the play side guard. It's a 3 technique on me. There'd be a down block from the tackle, and I am taking a drop step pull to kick out the defensive end. If the defensive end comes upfield, I will continue on up my track to the linebacker. So again, that drop step has been very important to us, but the key here is not to take an extra step, not to gather with that outside foot. So just one more time, it's a quick step, and then step directly to 2 o'clock. Do not bring this foot back and then try to step with this foot. It's wasted movement, wasted time. A great drill for that is what we started off in movement skill development, which is hot foot over the line. Helps that quickness of that first step.